Now, we have a battle going on when it comes to Omicron that it feels like the libs are increasingly just in denial about. And let me say one thing to you. We have, and I have to be very careful, because if I ever get ahead of where things are, even if it's a prediction or raising a question, I might end up with some hit piece in a major newspaper or on a TV channel or something, right? So I just want to say this. Given the realities that we know about hospitalization and mortality for those who had just the first round, not including boosters in this, the first round of vaccinations in the UK and in Israel, I am very curious. I think it's very important for us to see what the actual data tells us about how many of the people. Right now, they're saying around 1,800 a day on average are dying from COVID in the United States. Still a high number. And they would lead you to believe that 99 out of 100 of them, more or less, based on the rhetoric, are the unvaccinated. Is that really true? I'm just asking the question. Is that really the number? Because I've seen hospitalization data stretching back over a month ago that showed in some states 30% were vaccinated and hospitalized. So wouldn't the mortality data also track more closely with that? Why aren't we getting more clarity on this? Asking those questions. I'm going to return to this, I'm sure, in about a month or two and say, yeah, about those numbers. Just like how we've seen with the hospitalization data. I think there was a piece coming out of the Daily Mail in the UK suggesting that a large percentage, I think it said 40% of hospitalizations that the National Health Service of the UK were dealing with were not, in fact, primarily for COVID. Well, if 40% of your number isn't really for COVID hospitalization, I mean, your COVID hospitalization numbers are wildly inflated, right? We can all agree with this. But you see, there's a momentum to power and control. Once the machinery of control, once the apparatus is fully underway, it's not only hard to turn it off, it doesn't want to turn off. And that's what you're seeing with the Democrats and Fauciism right now. They've gotten used to this. And they're terrified about what happens the moment that they don't have it. At best, what they would like to do is what we saw in the past after the first round of major vaccinations in the spring of 2021, when they said, okay, no more masks, we're all done. But they always kept the masks on planes. They always kept in the background the right to turn back up the control dial on all of us. And now, as we know, we're not quite at 11, but we're getting close to it on that dial. Spinal Tap reference for those of you who haven't seen the movie. Probably the most famous line of that whole movie. It goes to 11. So now we're dealing with the rejection of results and data and the experience of the American people, both from Biden in the press conference. The economy's great. You just don't know it. The shelves are totally full. You just don't know it. Inflation's going to come down as we spend trillions on Build Back Better. You just got to trust me. These are the things he's saying. We also have a Democrat apparatus that isn't being honest about what we're seeing when it comes to COVID specifically. Like, what's actually happening here in our battle against COVID? Why is it that the Flint school system, for example, just said they're going on indefinite remote status? What? Biden says 95% of schools are open. Okay, 100% of schools should be open. 100%. Shouldn't be 95%. That's a lot of schools that are closed across the nation. 5% of the tens of thousands of schools we're talking about here, that's a lot of kids that are getting left out. So what's going on? Why is the Democrat Party coming down more harshly on the wall? As we know, because teachers' unions, Democrat power structure, a lot of lazy, self-indulgent public sector unions involved here that always raise money for and vote for Democrats. So the kids suffer. The kids suffer. And that's what I really wanted to focus on for right now. The amount of forced sacrifice that the Democrats and the Fauciites have put children through and young people through for COVID is appalling. They have normalized and even mandated child abuse, making children eat their lunch outside in 30-degree weather with a mask on because adults are too stupid or too cowardly or both to let the kids be indoors for lunchtime is child abuse. If we were a more sane and normal society right now, we would send people to prison for doing this. Instead, Fauci and the other lab coat fascists run around applauding this kind of stuff, essentially giving cover to it. You know, you can never mask enough. You can never be cautious enough. This is what we get. Masking of school children continues while masking of adults does not. Children are not at risk from COVID and do not spread COVID in significant numbers, okay? The problem is we can never say zero, and so we can't actually win these rhetorical battles. This really does matter. You know, when I say masks don't work, they say, yes, they do. Okay, maybe 5% filtration might limit 1% of cases in a given area or something. You're going to act like psychos. And they turned around a plane. This just happened from Miami to London. Think people are all ready to go to London. You can now have like tea and crumpets. They're all ready to do this. And the plane turns around because someone on the plane wouldn't mask up properly. The whole plane gets turned around. This is lunacy. I mean, you're masking up between bites to begin with. There is no medical basis for this. Oh, but our transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg, you know, he's on it when he's not on paternity leave or whatever. Yeah, he's on it, making sure that we all have to mask up all the time. It's absurd. Why are we masking children and not adults? Because adults vote and kids don't. And kids don't have power, and they're being forced to suffer. And their brainwashed parents, in many cases, who watch too much MSNBC, go along with all of this. Here is Florida Surgeon General Dr. Ladapo talking about forcing the masking of school children is just completely unnatural and unnecessary. Play clip 7.
We've entered this, it's just a very bizarre period that we're in where people are just willfully denying data. I mean, I don't know how anyone at this point in the pandemic, having seen country after country, including this country, and state after state, essentially have similar surges throughout this pandemic, regardless of whether they have mask mandates, whether they force the kids to mask in school, whether they adopt the vaccine passports. There's really no substantial difference. So, you know, I feel that so many leaders right now are essentially data deniers.
They are. Because if they were to look at the data, they would have to admit that what they've done is wrong. And if they admit that what they've done is wrong, people who have been suffering through this, and particularly parents who recognize that masking your kid up with an N95 is a form of psychosis that adults are imposing on children. All right, they're making kids suffer for the adults' neurological insufficiencies. That this would be a problem for leftists who are obsessed with power and who also can't go about their normal lives without constantly mask shaming others and acting like lunatics. Right. This is what we are up against.